have to go into this, or you have to go into this industry, or you have to go into a specific realm, and there's all these rules and regulations. But I think once you get to that recent grad level, you're kind of taking the keys, you're taking the pen back, and you're getting to write this story that you want to write. And there's a lot of pressure that comes with that as well. But I do want us to acknowledge one thing, that our story, we are not our circumstances. We don't get to control what zip code we're born into, what ethnic makeup we have, or what level of privilege, but we do get to decide the story that we continue writing. And so I want to talk a little bit about how you can start owning your story, owning where you come from, and how you can start paving the way for your own path, and how it's helped me in my career. So I want to go deeper, a little bit about me. Going back into childhood, I want to talk about something. There was a moment that always felt safe for me, and I promise this is going to come full circle. There was I'm very Latina, and I own it. I have double hoops on to prove it. But for me, going back to childhood, there was a moment that always felt very safe to me, and I wonder how many of you all can relate. It was this act of warm cup of coffee in my hands. And yes, I was definitely drinking coffee as a child. It's a Honduran rite of passage, although the coffee was mostly milk, and, I digress. But the simple act of a cup of coffee warming the palm of my hands while, aromas of freshly brewed coffee beans filled the air. And then it was muffled with loud, hearty laughs and Latinos talking over each other at high volumes, trying to get a word in. All that while merengue and punta played in the background, all of that felt safe to me. Something about coffee, I think, made us all pause for a second, and it was like sips and stillness and brief silence. And then my family would begin what felt like oral history. Some may call it gossip or chisme, but I called it oral history. And I was the youngest of seven and generationally the youngest in my extended family. So I wasn't allowed to necessarily be a part of these conversations, but I was unofficially invited to listen and observe while I sip my warm milk with coffee and eat my traditional Honduran bread called semita. Some of you may know it as concha, or some of you may not know it at all, and that's okay. But I remember being completely immersed in their stories and like hyper fixated in the way they uttered words or incorporated sounds or expressions or movement. My dad, he was super expressive. He was like a performer. He had grandiose gestures and actions and facial expressions. He'd even stand up and play a part of a character just to bring it to life. He had laugh lines that filled every inch of his face as he somehow inserted a lighthearted joke into whatever memory he was sharing. And no matter how heavy the topic, humor always took center stage. My mom she was kind of the detailed storyteller. She lingered for an ungodly amount of time on context, like figuring out the color of a car when really we asked her how she met my dad. But she was this oral painter. She was giving you context and color and setting before she even gave you the plot. And honestly, sometimes the plot wasn't even important. It was the journey that she took you on. Then there was my uncle who was more calm and stoic and a man of few words, but his gestures and his facial expressions told more of the story. And he was often, to me, the most interesting to observe because you almost had to read his body language and you knew that he had a lot more to say. Then there were brothers and aunts and cousins, more people who fed off the stories. Some shared their point of view, some shook their heads in agreement, while others they were kind of questioning the validity with their story, with their faces, and some interrupting and some laughing off the top of their lungs. But I was in love with the moment. I was in love with all of it. Each contributor was like a museum of like knowledge and culture and history, and I was just taking it all in. There was a moment though, and this is a really big part of my story. There was a moment in 2008 that I think we can all remember. Or if you can't remember it, maybe you can recall it in history. That's where recession hit, and Latinos in particular were hit really hard, especially immigrants and those that are undocumented as well. And we were the ones, one of the many affected. And that was actually the moment that I started to fall in love with writing because the stories kind of stopped. There wasn't this aroma-filled coffee in the air. There wasn't any of that anymore. But there was me and the pen and the paper, and I started to fall in love with words, starting to fall in love with writing. I couldn't be part of oral history, right? But I could be part of archiving stories in a different way. And at the same time, I was telling myself a story. And what I didn't realize is at the time, they were actually limiting beliefs. I was telling myself that my story was this one of struggle and shame and poverty and hardship. And I had to change myself. I had to work 10 times harder than anyone else to make it. I had to change the hoops and the red lipstick and the long nails. I had to change my accent a little bit so that I could be accepted and welcomed. I started to tell myself all these different stories. And so I graduated, I had a job offer. I thought I did, in fact, make it. I mean, I was a first generation graduate. I had cum laude. I thought I was big time in. I thought I was balling. And so what I did struggle with though at the time was I didn't really know who I was after kind of peeling back all these layers of what made me me and moving away for school and moving away from those cafecito moments. I was struggling with who I was and what my purpose was because for a long time, I thought my purpose was to never be in that situation in 2008 that I was in and never be a part of that again. So I had to do anything to get to that made it place. And I heard often a lot of other limiting beliefs around me. I was hearing that I was interested in way too many things, that I had to be less of a dreamer, more focused and rigid and strategic, and pick one lane and one career for the rest of my life and hone in on one skill or one industry. And I couldn't be the big dreamer that I was. And so I found myself post grad in a job that everyone said was good, but I wasn't really in love with. I was making minimum wage, taking three forms of transportation from San Jose to the city every single day, back when you had to go into the office 5 times a week. And I was crashing on my friend's couch because I couldn't afford to live in the area that I was living. And I was super lost and I wanted to have a change. And so then began my journey of figuring it out. And one thing I'm going to tell you right now is everyone at all stages of their career and life are figuring it out. And no one has it figured out. And I think life is really about figuring it out and changing and evolving and sidestepping and this non-linear journey to get to where you actually want to be. And where you want to be might change. It changes all the time. One thing I also do want to say is at this moment, I had left the job that I was working in. I wasn't happy in it. And literally on my way from San Francisco down back to San Jose, I get a call from a friend and she's like, "Hey, I'm in Redwood City at a networking event. You should come." And at this time, I'm like, "Ugh, I don't really like networking events. I don't know if I should go. Like, maybe I should just go home." I'm like, just left my job. I'm not having a good day. And she's like, "No, no, no, come." And I want to pause and say, community, the people in your life matters so much, whether it's the people you meet at networking events or the friends that are calling you saying, "Hey, come to this networking event." Those people, keep them in your life forever. But I digress again. I end up going to this networking event in Redwood City. I go and then I talk to a former professor at San Jose State who I took her class and I loved her. And she starts asking me like, "Oh my God, how's the new job? How's this? How's that?" And I'm like, "Oh, I actually left. I'm looking for XYZ. I really want something that I could be creative and I can like create and build and take down." And like, I was telling her about all these interests that I had. And she said, "Oh, I'm actually hiring for my company. You should apply." I ended up applying. And then she is actually the person that changed my life, Renee Siegel. If anyone knows who that is, please give her all the flowers. But she changed my life, and I tell you why. I walked into the interview and, I was a little nervous. Again, this is back in the day where you had to go into the office and do the interview. But I went into the office, I sat down, and, we say, "Hey, hi." And then she's like, "Okay, so what's your story?" And so I begin. I'm like, "Oh, well, I'm a recent graduate, cum laude. I was this and I was that, all this accolades." I was telling her all the things, all the titles that I had and all the things that I've done. And she's like, "No, no, no. Like, what's your story?" And I was like, "Well, what do you mean?" She's like, "Well, tell me about yourself. Tell me about who you are. Why did you get interested in communications and marketing?" I don't know. And so I'm looking at her with a blank stare and I'm like, "Oh, I totally am not going to get this job." And I'm sitting there and then I end up going down this story about my dad. And I tell her about how my dad was the expert connector. At the time, the company was called Connext, and that was where I worked for 2.5 years. And I end up telling her about my dad being this grandiose storyteller, and I told you a little bit about him. And I told her that I used to look at him and say, one day I want to be as expressive as him and tell stories in the way he tells stories. And I want to connect with people the way he connects. And I want to do this and I want to do that. And I started telling her this story about my dad, which was not planned at all, and how much of who he is so ingrained in me. And that's what I want to do for the rest of my life. And she says, wow, I need to meet your dad one day. A week later, I end up getting the job offer and I worked with her for 2.5 years. All that to say is that your story is actually your superpower. Because there's a lot of people who can have the same accolades and qualifications and the same degree. But what's your story? What makes you unique? What makes you special? What's that inner compass telling you? What's your purpose? Those are the things that really matter and that will drive you. And so in that moment, she changed my life because she asked me, what's your story? I went home that day and I realized I'm far from home. I haven't had a cafecito with my family in like years. I haven't written in a long time. I didn't do any of the things that really did bring me joy or that brought that little girl sipping cafecito joy. So I found myself asking, what is my purpose? What is my story? But the first thing I had to do was really remove some of these limiting beliefs that I had, the belief that I wasn't qualified enough or that I wasn't enough or not connected enough, not professional enough, focused enough, seasoned enough, rich enough. I mean, the stories can continue. What I was telling myself was that I wasn't enough. But really, I am super creative. I am a dreamer. I am curious. I want to do it all. And that's all in my DNA. But going back to that little girl having coffee with her family, what I really loved and what I really am qualified in is stories. And so then began my journey of figuring out how do I get to do this for the rest of my life. And so my college to career journey is again non-linear. It's a little crazy, but what ended up happening is I went back to San Diego and I started to own these parts of me that make me me. And everyone knows I love my red lipstick, I love my long nails, my hoops. That's all just part of who I am. But I come from an immigrant family. They're dreamers and trailblazers by even just the very act of them immigrating to a different country that they had no idea how to navigate, but they did it. To me, that's fearlessness and that's dreaming and that's trailblazing and that's all part of me and my DNA. They were also creators. I mean, my mom was an entrepreneur before the entrepreneur term became sexy, right? She was staying at home, taking care of the family, taking care of the kids while she was working 3 jobs. She was creative in her own right. She was a seamstress and she was doing jewelry and she was doing anything that she could do from home while also making a living. My dad, my uncles, my brothers, they were engineers before engineering became a term. They were finding out creative ways with really minimal resources on how to do things around the house or how to build things and how to, again, not go buy something, but make it themselves. They were engineers in their own respect. So I come from a lot of greatness, and I think you all do too. And so my purpose and what I found, and I'm not going into all the details, but my purpose is really to tell and amplify stories that matter and find creative ways to do it. So now I write, I speak, I create, I strategize, I pivot, I plan, I host, I facilitate. And if you're looking at what my career has been, it's been a lot of that too. And so it doesn't feel right for me to just choose one thing that I do. I'm a storyteller in every sense of the word. And so going back from Southeast, I grew up in a environment that was rich with creators and engineers and dreamers and trailblazers. And then I went to college, San Jose State, shout out. I was a first gen graduate, did those things. And then this is the point where I grabbed the pen and I'm like, okay, what kind of story do I want to write? And this post-grad dilemma, which I told you about, was like, I was working this job. I was in the industry that I graduated in, but I was like, ooh, I don't know if I want to do this for the rest of my life. And so I left, no plan. And then I ended up going to a networking event, the power of network and community. And I ended up meeting my boss that I worked for 2.5 years. And working at that company, I ended up meeting a lot of other people who were working in big tech. They were actually my clients at one point, and I started to learn so much about the industry, started to learn so much about the different roles. I don't know if you all feel this, but there's so many roles that like I had no idea even existed. I'm like, you do project management? I do that all the time. Like, if you worked in a restaurant and if you were a server, you are basically a project manager, I have to tell you. But project management, I didn't know that was a track. I didn't know that you could do internal comms. I didn't know you could do events. Like, I didn't know there were so many things that you can do within the realm of the industry. And so my dilemma was I'm interested in a lot of things, so how do I pick and choose? And again, my story was my compass, and so I said I want to do something that is revolving around stories and community. And so I ended up going to LinkedIn after, and I worked there for another 2 years. And I fell in love with bringing stories to life through events and experiences. And so I was hosting panels and I was doing this and I was doing that. And it was a fun way to bring stories to life through an experience. At the same time, I had started my podcast, Hella Latina, because a part of me going back to owning my story, it also meant owning the parts of me that were very Latina, a part of my history that I did not know about, a part of my Honduran culture I didn't know about. And it was all part of that process. And so I found that a lot of other first gens were trying to figure out how do you navigate living between two cultures, between two sets of expectations, between two sets of narratives telling you how to live life or what is important in life and how do you blaze your own path. And so I created this podcast so that the first gen community, the Latin community, can really tell their stories and archive them. And I get to do the cafecitos every week, which is so cool. And it makes my inner me really, really happy. But I get to live out that purpose in my podcast, in my entrepreneurial efforts, and then also in my career. So at LinkedIn, I was bringing stories to life through events, through experiences, and specifically serving those who are young talent and recent grads and interns. And I was bridging the gap between young talent and these CEOs and these C-suite folks. And I'm trying to figure out ways to bring their stories to life so that these recent grads can have a future in tech. And so after LinkedIn, I now work at TikTok and I do content production. So what I do now is a little different. What I do now is I bring stories to life through film. And so I work with production companies and I get employees to sit in front of a camera, management to sit in front of a camera and talk about these different stories, these different products they're bringing to life. And so I get to tell stories in different ways. And if you heard me, my purpose is to really tell and amplify stories that matter and find creative ways to do it, whether it's a podcast, whether it's in film, whether it's an event, I can do that all. And so I tell you all of this because I've built a career that I get to dream and I get to play in and I get to live out my purpose. I get to hear stories all the time. Basically, I'm drinking coffee all the time. But for me, this is the kind of career that I wanted to have. But no one could have told me that this was my career. No one could have prepared me for, oh, this is what you're going to be doing for the rest of your life, or this is how you should be moving. I think that you can take people's advice, you can listen, you can lean in, but there's also a part of you that has to listen to that inner compass and know what is actually driving you, what makes you want to wake up every single day and do what you do. And so I want to go into this quote that for me has always been kind of another quote that I come back to, another compass, if you will. And it says, our lives are a collection of stories, truths about who we are, what we believe, what we come from, how we struggle, and how we are strong. When we can let go of what people think and own our story, we gain access to our worthiness, the feeling that we are enough just as we are, that we are worthy of love and belonging. And I don't want to end on a woo-woo note, but I think that the stories that you tell yourselves really do matter. The stories that you tell others really do matter. You're about to go into these breakout sessions and meet employers. What's the story that you're going to tell? And so I also want to tell you to dream so big that it scares you. Continue dreaming and playing and trying and pivoting and know that your story is going to continue to evolve. So I want you all to really just take the pen back and write a story that you're going to be so proud of, a story that challenges you and makes you and changes you and radicalizes you, but makes you think, and a story that you get to pass down to others in that oral history. And I also implore you all to lean into stories. Listen to the stories around you, whether you want to go back to yourself and where you come from. Lean into the stories that your parents say, your family talks about. Lean into the stories like in this session right here, the people who are around you. Lean into other people's stories. Be curious. And I think that curiosity, dreaming can all take you to new heights that you probably didn't even know you could reach. And so one of the things, and I want to give you some key takeaways from all of this. One is your story is your power. Two is that community And I don't mean just networks. I mean like community can also provide so many opportunities. I didn't say this, but for me, every single job that I've received, internship, business opportunity, entrepreneurial opportunity, everything I've ever received in my career to this point has been through someone I knew and someone who knew me. Connections, that is going to be a really big part of your career. And I'm saying this so that you can all connect with each other on LinkedIn and connect with me as well. Connections is really, really, really important. And the third thing I'll say is that your career can be whatever you want your career to be. There is no right way to do it. And so, as you are here, recent grad or about to graduate, wherever you are in that kind of cusp, as you're at the top of this mountain looking to your future, like, what do I do now? I really, really hope that you get to write a story, write a career story that you're really proud of, and you get to continue evolving it. There's no, again, one way to do it. You can play and iterate and pivot and play with your career and have fun doing it because at the end of the day, you're doing this for 40 hours a week or more. Pick something that's going to make you happy, that's going to make you want to wake up every single morning. And if that means pivoting and changing it up sometimes, so be it. I want to end here and say thank you. Again, careers are all over the place and they're messy and they're fun and it can be beautiful and it can be really purpose driven. So again, I really hope that you all get to think about your story a little bit and really own the bits and parts of you that make you you, that make you unique and special, that make these employers want to hire you. So I'm gonna pass it on to Kristin or Carrie, but I do want to put my information here. I want you all to reach out to me. I'll look out for who's connecting with me on LinkedIn. I can also share it in the chat as well, but I hope we get to stay connected. And if you have any questions, if you want more connections, if you want me to be the plug for anything, or even the referral, let me know and I got you.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. I am sitting here so inspired and thinking about my own story, and I know our students are probably, or our graduates are probably doing that as well. Um, I want to give this people in the chat here an opportunity to ask some of their questions. So I'm going to be reading, and if you have questions that you'd like to ask Jasmine, go ahead and put them into the chat box for us. So our first question is, could you possibly elaborate on how you navigated your pivots and stood out as an applicant?
The pivots were pivoting. The first one was I just left. I don't know. I'm actually, actually, there's two times in my career that I have just left a job. And I don't recommend that to anyone unless you really, really want to. But I think that at the time, I didn't know another option. So the first time I pivoted was left that job that I was a recent grad in. It was an internship. They had an offer for me to go full time, and I said no, and I ended up leaving. And that's the story that I told you from going down Redwood City and then going to that networking event. That first pivot, no one tells you how to leave a job, but I think the biggest thing that I learned in that moment was to one, honor yourself. If you're not happy, know that and have the courage to leave. And I think too, be really honest with whoever you're speaking to and also respectful. So when I got the offer from my manager, I told him, hey, I think this is not a place where I think I can grow or thrive or where I want my career to go. And I was very honest, but I was also very respectful. And I just said, so I'm thinking of leaving or denying this job offer. He didn't take it well, I have to be honest. And I think that there's this fear sometimes when you're young in your career that, oh my God, I'm going to burn bridges or, oh my God, he's going to never hire me again. And the truth is that the network is really big and always move respectfully, moving according to your character, but also know that there are other people in the industry that will root for you and have your back. At the time, he told me, well, good luck trying to find a job at your age that will make you more than 70K. And at the time, that was a lot of money. I don't know how much it is now, but that was something that I had told him I wanted to have a job that paid me a little bit more too. And like he was really kind of going deep into it. Maybe that is a lesson for all of you. Maybe don't go too deep into why you're leaving. But I did end up finding a job that did give me 70K right after. So I think that it's possible, but you have to be super intentional and it's not going to be easy. It's going to be really hard. I mean, I told you about that job that I got through the networking event, but that was an off chance. What happened after is I ended up leaving that job that I was at for 2.5 years with that CEO. And I didn't have a job for 8 months. And I could have gotten a lot of job offers and kind of walk into anything that was going to give me an opportunity. And I think sometimes in those moments of desperation, because I have bills to pay, I have people to take care of, it was really easy for me to almost be like, okay, yes, I'll just take the job. It's fine. But I knew deep down that I didn't want a job that I wasn't excited about because I had just left a job that I really actually loved, but I knew I wanted more. And so I was job hunting for 8 months. A lot of what happened during that pivot was talking to people. I started messaging people on LinkedIn. This was like mid 2020. Started talking to a lot of people on LinkedIn, having kind of coffee chats. And I was trying to figure out how to find a career that I was happy in, find a career that I was actually going to be excited about. And again, I think at the 7th month mark, I was like, maybe I should just take the job. This job offer, it wasn't paying a lot of money, but it was something and nothing else was kind of working out. And then I ended up getting a referral at LinkedIn. And then I went through the interview process, which took a month, a whole month. And it was like 5, 6 rounds of interviews. And then I ended up getting the job. And I'm really happy that I waited and was really intentional about what I wanted. And then I worked there. The other pivot that happened after LinkedIn is I got laid off. So that's another story. So things happen. I mean, sometimes you pivot on your own. Sometimes the company, the industry, the economy makes you pivot. And I think that pivoting is just something that is a constant in this space. And I think it's something that never gets easier, but you get more tools and you get more skills and you're able to kind of navigate it.
Wow, thank you so much. So real. And I think everyone thinks that everybody else has just gotten their job so quickly and then they've stuck with it for a long time. And you're here
I
to show
wish.
us it's not. It's not like that
Yeah.
at all. We've got some wonderful questions coming in the chat. And one of them was, can you give others people examples of events that you went to that changed your life? You talked about putting yourself out there at networking events, and it's all about meeting new and different people. If you were looking in San Jose today, what kind of events would you be considering?
I mean, I think that when I was younger in my career, we work in a digital space now, which I think is really fire and it gives you a lot more opportunity. I think that networking events can be really tough. And I'm going to be really honest that sometimes networking events is not my favorite thing because it's very transactional. It can be really stuffy. I think networking for me is more, I say like homie bonding. Like I'm like, I just want to bond with people. I want to connect with people on a human and fundamental level. So I talk about anything but work first. And then if we connect on work, I'm like, oh, cool. And then what ends up happening, and I think people forget this, is that we want to work with people that we like too. And so if you go to someone and you just kind of start talking like, Kristin, this is my resume. This is a job. I have like all these accolades again from work. I think you're going to be like, okay, cool. But stories, literally, stories, our brains love it. I mean, even our brains process data through storytelling. So, storytelling is a really important piece of like connection. And so, for me, I go into these networking spaces knowing already that I don't necessarily thrive in those like transactional conversations. So, what I do is I treat it like I'm going to a bar. I'm like, hey, like, how are you? Oh my God, I love those shoes, or I love this, or hey, I love your hair, whatever. Like, I find something to bond over. And then we can talk about work. And if we do, now I know you like me and that we vibe as humans. And then from there we can go. But also don't take into consideration the people that are already in your life that are also connected. I mean, when I was in school, my only connections was church and my family, and we didn't have anyone I knew that were going to college or were working these jobs. And so as you start building these networks, even the people that are in your life right now, you never know, they might have those networks as well. So take that into consideration. Again, a lot of the people in my life and my circles have actually referred me to a lot of these jobs as well. And I love seeing the LinkedIn links in the chat because that is how you start building it. LinkedIn is like the biggest tool for networking as well. So many people, like I've met so many people. I've built my own community on LinkedIn. I think that is a tool that you should all take advantage of and just message people. Again, like slide into those DMs. I know y'all know how to do it. So slide into the DMs on LinkedIn and like start connecting with people. The worst that can happen is they leave you on red and they say no or they don't have time, which is fine. Keep trying, keep going. And now you have me. If you see someone I'm connected to, say, hey, can you make an introduction? Here's what I want to talk about, etc. Hopefully that's
Yeah.
helpful.
Oh, it's absolutely, so helpful. And one of the things I wrote down when you were talking was oftentimes what we see in the career centers as students are learning to figure out what their stories are. They think their story is they're a graduate of San Jose State with a business major and they run a club. But what you're trying to get them to think about is what really fires you up even outside of that. And once you identify what fires you up, you're opening up new
Mhm.
communities.
Yeah.
So on that note, I'm curious, do you have a mentor who's really like pushed you to try new things? And if so, how did you meet them?
Oh, I have it's so funny because I used to think mentors was like this official thing. Like I had to be like, Kristin, can you be my mentor? But I think that mentors come and go into your life. Like I would say I've had so many people in my life that have mentored me in some respect. I don't think I have one specifically that has been like a mentor since I was like young and has just like navigated life with me. I think that you maybe have to think about it from, and I'm sure you've heard this, but like a board of directors, like who are the people in your life that are actually mentoring you in these different capacities? So like for me, my board of director is I have a trainer, I have a fitness trainer that is rocking with me. She has for the last 2 years, and she literally is helping me mentally just like fight these mental battles. And then I have a career one who she helped me get to my career now, but she's not going to be helping me moving forward because now I want to go more into the production side of things. And so she doesn't have that expertise, but she helped me up until this point. Now I have someone that is working in the production space, working in LA, and is teaching me all these different tools of how to be a producer, creative director. Like that is a space I want to go into. I have a therapist. Everyone should have a therapist, but like I have a therapist who is there in my board of directors as well. I have someone who is helping me figure out like how to do the podcast thing, entrepreneur thing, how to build multiple streams of revenue. Like there's so many people in my board of directors who help me now. So it's hard for me to sit here and say like I have one mentor that's like helping me through it all. I think I have a lot of people that I lean on for their wisdom and their niche kind of expertise. And I think that that's the way to look at it is who are the people in your circle and your tribe and your board of directors who are actually helping you in these different aspects of life. And it all comes full circle. It's all connected.
I love that. I'm so glad you're realizing or sharing that you really do need a board of directors, and job searching is not something you can do by yourself in a hole. And if you do, it can be
Hmm.
very lonely and stressful and take a very long time. So I'm putting it out
Yeah.
there in the chat for all of our graduates here today to start thinking about who might be on your board of directors. Another thing that you mentioned was when you're talking to people for the first time is really kind of making that personal connection. So
Mhm.
that and so do you have any tips for those of us, me included, who are introverts? How do you personally make a connection at an event like this? What do you do or say that makes it a little less awkward?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you can always avoid the awkward moments. I think it comes with like the space. There's a few things, there's a few tips that you can do. One is always find something that that person has that you like. Like I'm a big like I'm gonna give you your flowers. Like if I see you have an outfit on that I'm like, oh my God, that outfit's so fire, or I like your jewelry, like I'm gonna always compliment you. So I think complimenting is always one avenue of like hey, like Kristin, I really like your hair. Like, where'd you get it done? Or I really like your makeup or your jewelry. I don't know. I find something to bond over. It's almost like I think girls like to do it. Not to say guys don't, but I think girls like to like compliment each other. So I think that's my one tip is find something that that person has, whether it's even like a laptop with a sticker that is like your favorite company or something. Like find something to connect on. And then from there, kind of see the vibe, like see if like, okay, Kristen's not really receptive to me complimenting her. She's not really wanting to talk. That's okay. Keep it moving. So that's one. I think the second thing is, and my favorite thing to do is find someone that I know. Like if I see Carrie and Miguel are talking and I'm like, oh, I know Carrie, I'm gonna go over and I'm gonna see if she can introduce me to Miguel. And so that is an option too. Find someone that you know. And if you're the other person on the receiving end, like let's say Carrie, you're the person that can be the conduit between two people, like connect them. I think that's the role that I like to play is I like to call myself the plug. Like if you come to me and I know someone, like I will always bridge gaps and make connections. I think that is power. Community is power. I say it often. So I think those are two ways to do it. I think the second thing or the third thing that I'll say, and this is again maybe a little harder for those who are introverts. I think that being totally like human. I remember, and I want to be like specific and give you an example of this, but I remember being in a panel and I was sitting next to someone I didn't know. I didn't even know what their background was, what field they were in. It didn't really matter, but it was so hot in that room. Like when I tell you, like the room was like we were all just like this, and I just looked over at him and I was like, please tell me it's not just me that's like dying right now of the heat. And then he was like, no, it's so hot. And then we ended up talking and laughing. And then turns out he worked at this company that I'm like, oh my gosh, like, you know, this person. And then now we're friends on LinkedIn and now we're even friends on Instagram. But I think that even just being human, like, just put all the facade away for a while and just be like, man, we're all in this situation and it's super hot in this room. Like, it's not just me, is it? So I think like being human is also a way to just connect. Again, people want to work with people they know, they like, that they can vibe with, that they want to see every day for 40 hours a week. I think just being human and knowing like maybe if I put myself out there, I can see if that person and I just connect on a fundamental level.
So many great tips. Thank you. Thank you so much. We've got time for maybe one more question. And one thing that is kind of on my mind is you talked about how you do need to take risks and you do need to take chances. And I know I've heard quotes about like, you know, if you don't apply for a job, there's no chance you'll ever get it. So what other
Mhm.
like the tips or suggestions do you have that you feel like are key during this part of the process?
During the application process or just during the job hunt process?
Job hunt in general.
So one thing that helped me is I actually did have a career coach at one point. And I ended up hiring her because I just wanted to see if there were strategies in the job hunt process because you know what happens, I don't know if you're all aware, but what happens when you apply is it goes into this massive like database and then there's actual bots that are going through your resume for the bigger companies. There are bots that are going through your resume and putting together keywords of the job description and then it goes into the first round where the recruiter is actually looking at your resume. So there's a window there where it gets really, really like interesting for you as the one who's creating your resume. Think of your resume as the barrier of entry and look at your LinkedIn because people will look at your LinkedIn as the complement to that. So your resume is almost like, what's the best thing I can compare this to? Like a profile, a dating profile. So think about it from keywords perspective, right? Like you're looking at your resume, look at the job description and put yourself in the recruiter's eyes and see if I was a recruiter for this role, would I hire me? Knowing what I know from myself, which is just my resume. Like they're only looking at your resume. And it's not even the bots are looking at your resume if you're applying for those bigger companies. So look at the job description, look at your resume, and you evaluate yourself. Am I qualified for this? Now, don't overthink it, but look at the key words from that job description. Look at the key messages that that job description is trying to send, what they're hiring for, and make sure you add that to your resume. Also, make sure you have some numbers in there if you can throw it in there. Numbers, data loves numbers. The bots love numbers and recruiters love numbers. But I think that's what you have to think about from the first like initial moment. This person has no idea who Lisa is, but what she does know, this person as in the bot, what she does know is that the resume she's looking at is the only thing that's going to let her know that it is a qualification to go into the screening process. So I think understanding the recruiting process for some of these bigger companies that you may be applying for, or the smaller ones, thinking about it from the perspective of the company. So what are they looking for and what can you do to make it easier for them to know your story from a resume perspective? From that, the recruiter then gets your resume if you pass that first like initial bot thing The recruiter looks at your resume and then says, okay, like they have all the qualifications, but they might not have some of the things that we're looking for, or they may not have enough stories about, I don't know, what kind of impact they made in that company. Impact is really important. People are always looking for that. So, what they do next is they go to your LinkedIn and then they look at your LinkedIn profile and they see if you have any more information on there. Again, this is all part of the process. So, make sure your LinkedIn is always a complement to your resume. From there, they go into the other process, the resume screening. There's a lot more tips I can give you from every single stage of the process, but that first screening is also really important. You're meeting someone for the first time, they don't know you. Make sure you come with stories about the impact that you made, kind of again, supporting what's already on your LinkedIn and your resume. From there, you kind of continue on the process. Think about it as like a first date. You're going on the first date, it's a coffee chat, and you're like, okay, I'm not going to give you the whole enchilada about who I am, but I'm going to give you the impact. I'm going to give you the things that are going to make you want to come back. And so they come back, they go into the second interview, the third, and the fourth. All of that is more and more. They want to get to know you and see if you're a fit culturally and if you're a fit in terms of qualification. But no, if you get to that first level, that first screening, you're qualified. And keep telling yourself that you're qualified, you're qualified, you're qualified. Now it's just about telling them, hey, this is a little bit more about who I am and the impact I can make in your company. And also for you, I need you all to know that this is also a moment for you to evaluate if that company is for you too. And figure out the process. Like write notes down. I would have a Excel sheet because I'm a little extra, but I had an Excel sheet where I kept track of every single company and job application that I had. And then I would even take notes about how the company made me feel like, oh, I really liked this interview. I really liked the people that were there. I'm going to message them on LinkedIn and say, hey, thank you for the time. Thank you for blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to be memorable. And I worked a little harder for those. And there was some that I was like, not really excited about that. Maybe I don't have to go through the rest of the interview process because I'm looking out for this one, or I'll just keep going for the practice. Like keep track of all those things.
Yeah.
There's so much I can say, but I'm gonna pause there. If you have more questions about that process, reach out to me or I can connect you with other recruiters as well who will give you a little bit more insight.
Wow, you summed it up so well. We need to hire you for the Career Center to give our inspirational speeches on a daily basis. Thank you so much, Jasmine. And just to tag on to that, just as Jasmine worked with a career coach, as alumni within 1 year of graduation, you have access to free career services, many of our digital tools, and you can meet one-on-one with career counselors. So please go on our website, take advantage of this tool to get some extra perspective. And with that, Jasmine, if you have not already, please put your information in the chat box so people can stay in touch with you. And I'm going to hand it over to Carrie because we have a lot of other employers here today who are going to bring even more knowledge and build upon what Jasmine has shared with us today. So, Carrie, it's on to you. And thank you, Jasmine.